Welcome back to Are We the Only Ones? I'm Kathy, and today I want to talk about how exhausted I am, and I'm sure all of you are, at the fact that Trump keeps killing good. Um, he recently is responsible for the killing of Renee Nicole Good. And everybody knows who this person is at this point, but just for information's sake, and maybe for our international audience too, actually. Renee Nicole Good was a veteran's widow, a mother. Um, she had two children, and she was the current spouse of a loving female partner. So she was also part of the LGBTQ community. She was actually on her way home in Minnesota, and then was being told to move her car. And as she was moving her vehicle, ICE agents, I don't think they liked the tone of what she was saying. She was just like, I'm not mad at you, dude. You know, go get some lunch. And that was from his microphone and his body cam footage. His name is Jonathan Ross. His words to her after he shot her were, fucking bitch. So, any woman that hears this story can already hear the tone and the words in their head because they've heard someone else, some other man, say that to them when they stood up for themselves in the past. And the fact that as women, we have been told our whole lives and conditioned our whole lives and scapegoated our whole lives at the idea that if we had behaved a certain way, that thing would not have happened. That moment would not have happened. But this is a perfect example of how we can be actually courteous and still be treated as if we mean nothing and that we are expendable and then that we deserved in some strange, mediocre of an excuse of a way, will then pivot the blame onto us and somehow find an excuse for the man who's the perpetrator and had all the power and the leverage in the moment. And it's interesting because the second he realized that he overstepped, he fled. I used to intern for the San Diego Police Department. That was my very first internship ever. And so I worked with the head of narcotics. I interned for him. And I understand how police can be in fear when they go on a call and they, you know, show up to handle domestic disturbance because you never know if there's a weapon. You never know. But this is the thing, you're the one with the power. So when we were with the Marine Corps for 9 years, when we would go overseas and we were in Japan and we would go help if there was like a natural disaster in Japan or in Korea or in anywhere in the South Pacific, our unit would be one of the units that would then get deployed to go do like diplomatic assistance. So I know how we behave overseas. We are so good for the most. I mean, literally, like just and when it comes to war torn areas, that can get a little bit crazy because again, the fear changes the way somebody reacts sometimes, like their fight or flight, because they know weapons, they know they're getting fire like live fire from enemy combatants. That's different. Okay. Now I'm talking about military with civilians in another country and our military or our ICE, which is this weird, almost like Trump's own personal military force, um, and our own American citizens. So our own United States Marine Corps military, when I saw them with my own eyes helping, like Japanese people, for instance, when there was a Category 5 hurricane that hit the Kintai Bridge in my Iwakuni, Japan town. Um, it was like all peaceful helping. We would never yell at anybody. Like it was just like, what would be the point of behaving like that? You're trying to help people, right? You're trying to provide some assistance. So the fact that I see these ICE agents when they're telling somebody to move their car on their own street in front of their own house, and then she complies, and then she says, like, I'm not mad at you, dude. Go get some lunch, right? Like, maybe you're hungry. Maybe that's why you're so fucking angry, right? And then he takes that as some sort of deep personal threat so that when she moves the car, he sees it as some kind of a self-defense move to then point the weapon point blank at her in her face and shoot her 3 times. And none of that makes sense other than he is a coward and he's afraid, and that which means he doesn't have the psychological profile to be an ICE agent. Remember, if you are someone who is supposed to be carrying a weapon, if you have a license to kill, which is what you would need to be able to carry a weapon, open carry, and fire it upon somebody without consequences, you also have a psychological profile that should be able to handle your fight or flight response that is superior to the status quo, which is why you have this special license to do this thing. It doesn't mean you can kill whenever. It just means that you have a special authority that would enable you to kill and not be prosecuted unless you violate rules of engagement, which is what he did because she was actually complying and not threatening him. There was no words of threat whatsoever towards him. That is the key that needs to be understood here. Now there's these other things about him being married to a Filipina woman. Is there complexities there? Yes, I am an Asian, I'm Vietnamese Chinese, and I'm married to a white man. I have been to enough countries and stayed in those countries long enough to start to understand their culture. Now, I've never been to the Philippines. Okay, to be fair, I've been to Thailand, Malaysia. I've been in Vietnam many, many times, and I even have a special sort of like visa for Vietnam because my dad was a resident in Vietnam for, I think, almost 10 years post retirement from America. So, and then I lived in Japan for 3 years. So I understand. I also did a lot of work in China when I was a fashion designer. I would go to Beijing. One time I went 9 times in 1 year. And I would stay there for like 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I would really get to know people because I was doing work. It was work. So when you go there for work, you get to know the culture of the people on a much different level than if you're just like on vacation. Okay. The nuance of being an Asian woman that is a foreign national as opposed to someone who was raised in America for most of their life, like I was, is that if I'm being honest, there is kind of like a hierarchy in the idea of moving out of your home country and marrying into a it tends to be a Western nation because Western nations tend to have higher economic buying power. But really, it could be any country, any spouse that would be more well off than you, and that where you could support if you needed this, where you could support your family. and that he was a good husband and would want to take care of you in that way. So is that possible that that's what happened? She somehow meets Jonathan Ross wherever. I don't know, Philippines. I'm imagining the Philippines because she's from the Philippines and they probably met there. If he was prime military, it's probably a deployment or something like that. And then he brings her to America. Now, the fact that he had lied to all of his neighbors about his employment, he said he worked in the art industry. Um, his neighbors were completely appalled when they saw him on the news and they couldn't believe, like, that's our neighbor. Oh my God. So their entire family is going in hiding. Do I feel bad for the Filipina spouse? Yes, because I don't think she understands the weight of what's going on. I think she just thought she married a nice guy. Didn't know that this was his personality, that he had this in them. They have children. I think they went to hiding, is what I've heard. They've gone to hiding. I feel bad for her. I don't think any of this should be on her. Like these articles about like her being married to him and that means he's not a racist. No, it doesn't. Just because somebody marries somebody of another race doesn't mean they're not racist. Think about all the slave masters that like hooked up with their slaves and had children with them, and then those children they were blood relatives of them. They would even sell off as slaves. Like, if that's not a perfect example of how like blood is not necessarily thicker than water, blood when it comes to mixing a racist person with a person of the race they're racist against, very complicated. Okay. So now I think the idea that members of ICE are not racist is ridiculous because there's members of ICE that have brown and black skin. I wouldn't be surprised if there were members of ICE that were Asian. I just haven't seen any yet, but I would not be surprised if there were some. Okay. I understand that in this economy, imagine making an economy so bad that people have to join ICE because it pays so well and have to basically violate and betray their own moralities and everything they stand for and the hypocrisy if they're a minority to have to go chase after hardworking minorities. They have not once sent a I don't know, platoon, what you would call it, a group of ICE agents into gang territories to go arrest any gang members. I mean, I'm even thinking that maybe our American gang members might be our best line of defense against ICE agents that are completely out of pocket, completely violating the laws. Maybe the Crips and the Bloods end up like MS-13. Maybe could you imagine if they all bound together, figured out how to like unite and then worked against ICE? Like, what a crazy turn of events that would be. But legitimately, I think that's one of the most likely scenarios. We know for sure that in Minneapolis, Minnesota, they tried to pull ICE agents from other cities like Houston, which tells you that they don't have enough manpower to basically control a city and make us an entire city submit to their sort of Gestapo like methods. So that's a good sign that if we stand up the way that the Minneapolis residents are like come out in serious numbers to protest, which has actually helped a lot. However, the ICE agents in Minneapolis are like legitimately treating it like a war zone because the footage I am seeing from Minnesota residents, Minneapolis residents, is like they're like, I was seeing tear gas getting thrown. There's like flash bombs going off. And this is in like residential neighborhoods, which means this could happen in your neighborhood. They could come to your town and just start doing basically like a martial law kind of vibe on your street. That in a peaceful American city, like that seems so unnecessary, you know? When I said they were cosplaying in the beginning of this year, I remember I was saying that Pete Hegseth, all of these cabinet members are cosplaying. Well, now they've allowed that cosplay to go down to Proud Boys. And Oath Keepers are now, there's a lot of them that became ICE agents. So now they're cosplaying as licensed, sanctioned, in their mind warriors, but really cowards, right? Because they're not going after anybody that's like dangerous to our community. They're going after people that actually help support the community. I can't say it's invisible labor. It's not invisible labor. It's visible labor, but it's invisibly paid, right? Like we don't see payroll, the salaries, the taxes, all that stuff, but they pay taxes. Immigrants pay more taxes than you would think because if you are working in America as an immigrant and you don't have papers, if you're using other people's papers, that money that you're paying taxes to, because they still take the money out of taxes, is going to somebody's account. So then it goes into like a business account in the IRS that's like unclaimed taxes. So there's hundreds of millions of dollars of that in those accounts. So they pay taxes. The idea that they don't. Plus they pay sales tax. Plus they pay gas tax when they buy gas. I mean, the only thing they can't do is buy a house, so they can't pay property tax. But they pay all the other taxes. So the idea they don't pay taxes is not true because the government takes taxes first and they refund it to us. So we all prepay our taxes, right? The idea that we pay our taxes in April is because we file. We've already paid them. The semantics that the government uses is something that you can see throughout all history is a very intellectual, methodical way of controlling the masses. If not in just the use of religion in itself, is a useful way to control the poor from wanting to attack the rich because in the afterlife, you will receive your glory, right? So don't do anything now. But the reality is that when you have people in the faiths that are not actually tied to or anchored to a faith that cares about the poor. So any of these, like, I guess they're evangelical, but the Joel Osteen type of people who preach the prosperity gospel. Look, I get it. I'm Asian, okay? Chinese, Vietnamese, we love money. We love like Chinese New Year, red envelopes, money in them. We love money, okay? So prosperity gospel can resonate with a lot of people. But the problem with the prosperity gospel is that if you look at the actual pastors and leaders of those churches or those faiths, when it comes time for them to do charity. So let's say there was like a natural disaster or a financial disaster. None of those mega churches opened up those churches to provide food, shelter, or financial aid to any of the poor in their community. Not a single one. So the prosperity gospel is really more of like a charlatan for the pastor pathway, right? Like there is something to be said about anybody that can mobilize a lot of people, get them to be their best selves. Um, but there's also something weird about like when you hit a threshold as a pastor where you're making your tidings are coming in so high that you're just like you can fly private jets, you can buy designer clothing. I don't care if you buy like every once in a while something, but if your entire closet is designer clothing, if you have a fleet being 5 cars or more, I had a fleet. Okay. Full disclosure. At one point, my family had a fleet of 5 cars, all white color. Okay. But I'm telling you that like, if a pastor has that, there should be a reduction of the amount of tidings that, or at least for the people that are poor in your church, should not have to provide 10% tidings. If you are able to have a fleet of luxury cars and a very nice house in a very nice neighborhood and all designer clothing, you should have to be definitely audited because those guys get tax-free they're under the religious like tax code. Okay. But here's the thing that's very interesting about the tax code. Vote Rent Lead is also under a special nonprofit tax code. These tax codes are very strict about doing things politically. So Vote Rent Lead, as much as it's a nonprofit, bipartisan slash nonpartisan organization, we are not allowed to endorse any candidates, even our own alumni. We're not allowed to endorse them under the tax law. So what I don't understand is how are these churches endorsing candidates without losing their tax status? When my organization is so worried about that, and every organization in the nonprofit space is worried about that, why are these churches not worried about it? Who do they donate to make sure that they could just act without impunity? It's one thing, look, I'm a Catholic, but I don't understand how churches get to do all of this to this level. If you're like a single pastor with a congregation of like 100 people, dude, totally, this person needs a tax break. Okay. But if you are a church that brings in more than, if your personal pastor or if your pastor or the head of the church can, if their revenue is anywhere in the $1 million range, they have to, there should be a Good Samaritan tax, honestly. So, but you can see how there's a double standard and really that's like serious right now for women being able to stand up for themselves, for um, American citizens that have paper. Like I carry my passport with me, but there are stories now of people that are carrying their passport and they just refuse to look at it and they still detain him. There was a 17-year-old that worked at Target who got detained and he had his passport on him and they refused to look at it and they detained him and they punched him. So this thing is like we're in the worst scenario you could possibly be in for a force like the police in New York and I believe Boston are telling ICE agents that they'll arrest them for illegal, I think, search and seizure, detainment, and arrests. So now you have, it's so like Game of Thrones where you have like Cersei's personal guard against, whatever prince's person, like all these personal guards. I remember watching like all these different personal guards are fighting each other on behalf. Like, how do you have a government like that? And I'm literally looking at that right now going, oh, I guess that can happen in 2026 modern era. So it's something that we have to basically the intellectuals and the people that we are all the altruistic people, all the good people in the country. We are letting Trump kill good. He killed Renee Good. He killed and he's killed good people, right? My mom was a saint. She died listening to the COVID vaccine rhetoric that he spewed. And so that is something I'm noticing is like this administration is taking out really good people. And then symbolically, they literally took out a woman whose last name is Good. And it was interesting to me, there were 5 celebrities at the Golden Globes that wore pins that said Be Good. And I'm supposed to reference like Star Wars. I wish they had referenced Wicked. I wished it had said For Good. And I wish that they had quoted the For Good song and then said their thing. Because here's the irony. When I gave my mom's eulogy, or my part in our Buddhist ceremony for my mom's funeral, I actually quoted lyrics from For Good from Wicked. This is before Wicked was even going to be like well known to be made into a movie. So the other irony is that John Chu is the director of that movie, and John Chu comes from my hometown, Los Altos, and knew my mom. So it's so ironic that now Renee Nicole Good, while Wicked is actually in the Golden Globes and in this is award season, in the award season period right now. I think next will be SAG Awards, and then it'll be the Oscars. So, there's the Emmys, and then there'll be Oscars. And the reason I know this because when I was working in celebrity fashion design, award season was our big season. So that's how I started. I worked on the Golden Globes. I helped with Jamie Lee Curtis's gown. I helped with Diane Keaton's gown. Um, I worked on the Emmys. It was like 2002 to 2004 was the period that I was like hardcore on the red carpet scene. So I know the award season really well. And I also know how many eyes are on people that are going to be interviewed. And it is a very powerful platform. So good on Mark Ruffalo for sort of leading that charge. And shame on Bill Maher for saying, oh yeah, I totally agree with their sentiment, but I wouldn't wear a pin about it. So when Wanda Sykes goes on stage and says, Bill Maher, you know, I love you, but I'd love to see a lot less. I was like, that was like perfect because exactly what he said on the red carpet is exactly what you mean. Like, you said you support it, but then you wouldn't wear a pin. Like, we love you, but a little bit less of you. That's like perfect example of that. And full disclosure, when we were in Hawaii, when my mom, so we were in Hawaii during COVID, my kids got sick with COVID and they had gotten one vaccination and I just didn't understand. We were in New York, so the vaccination waiting period for kids was 2 weeks. And when we went to California, it was 3 weeks. So I was off by a week and then we had to go to Hawaii. They catch COVID in Hawaii. We seal them in a room with literal press and seal to seal this room because we ended up getting a 1 bedroom, got upgraded because we're like some kind of status or whatever for Bonvoy. So you get upgraded for free and it's 1 bedroom. Then we find out the kids get COVID. We get tested. We all have COVID or they have COVID. My husband and I don't have COVID. And at the same time, my mom in Vietnam calls me on Christmas Day and tells me that she has COVID. So this is from Christmas to New Year's that we're stuck in Hawaii. And, it was one of those times where you just recognize that it's going to be bad. And so it's just ironic that all of this stuff is happening where it's like bringing up all these memories for me, but I get to see it. For me, it's like this. It's like I'm watching a train slowly about to fall off a bridge. That's what I feel like. I have already seen this movie because my experience with this administration has already been misleading information, telling good people to do something, and then when they do it and they follow you and then they die, you have nothing to say. You have nothing, no accountability. So when the second campaign and election came for Trump, I was like, you cannot. You guys, everybody's talking about how January 6th, which is the day that I moved to LA. I was in the sky on January 6th, wondering if this land was going to still be functional. Was this country going to be functional? And as a former Vietnam, you know, child of war and understanding how a government can fall that fast, I was like, not to this guy. But look, I'm in the reality show circuit world. Like I was on a reality show for fashion. And I was a fan of The Apprentice, so I understand how this happened. The slow burn of Donald Trump becoming president. Oh, I understand how it happened. I understand the power of The Apprentice. I understand the power of reality TV. I also understand the fakeness of reality TV from being on a reality TV show where they made it seem like one thing and it was totally something else for the people that were participating that had in good faith were doing work, staying up all night, and then only to find out that it was a vehicle for the famous people that were already on there to sort of like leapfrog into another industry or to pivot. So they just used all of us and we got nothing out of it. None of us had any success out of it. So that's why I look at reality TV much differently, but I do understand the power that it has because you can see how, there are real stars that have come out like Simon Cowell. I got to give that guy props. Every show that he's done, he's actually delivered on the promise to the performers that came through that they were going to have a career, and they did. So no hate, honestly, no hate on Simon Cowell from me because he delivered. My problem is seeing something like what The Apprentice was able to do and turn somebody who is evil and repackage him into somebody good and let him pretend to be good while he's killing good. That is extremely disturbing to me, that we have a media landscape that can do that, and that even though we see that, we don't have a way to react against that at the same pace of which they sold it to us. So I'm observing and wondering where we're going. I think from a global perspective, the fact that other countries are now saying and making plans without America shows that globalization does have its benefits in terms of worldwide order. However, we want to be part of that worldwide order, not the reason they had to create a separate sort of like conglomerate, separate coalition. That's horrible. That's the absolute um, reverse. It's like I want to say antithesis, but like for those of you that, yeah, easier, maybe like it's like an Uno reverse. All the work that we have done for diplomacy in the last 60 years has been undone in this last year. So there's a report that USAID being shut down has resulted in hundreds and thousands of unnecessary deaths around the world. I'm sure many of these were good people. All the people that worked at USAID were good people, and he killed all the good. He actually killed people. He killed good people's careers. He killed the good that we were doing in the world. America as a rich nation helping poorer nations. If that doesn't tell you that the trickle down theory is a lie, I don't know what does. You have people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, who could cure world hunger right now and have tens of billions left over, choose not to. That proves the trickle down theory is a lie. That proves that altruism, automatically believed in the wealthy, is a lie. If anything, right now in this period, this is the most corrupt time period we have ever seen with people that have the most wealth. If anything, that should enrage everyone to demand that they must split the bill on world hunger. Go Dutch, as they say. I mean, the Dutch be owing us. The Dutch gave us apartheid. Did you know that? Did you know that the Dutch gave us apartheid in South Africa? Yeah, that's who gave us apartheid. The Dutch. But who did the Dutch learn it from? They studied Jim Crow from America. So it is important that what we see in Minnesota and the Midwestern flyover states doing the good work, everyone in the Midwest, everybody in flyover states, you need to watch what's happening there. They're coming to you first. Do you know why? Because I don't think you have gangs like we do in the cities. They know well if they come to the big cities, we actually are armed. We were armed, not the way that the South is armed. We're armed in a weird way, but we are not the kind of cities that are not like, we stand up, we fight back. So that's why they're not coming to us first. They tried to see it and they saw LA was not going to take it. They see how quick New York has protested. So they went to Minnesota. Also, why did they go to Minnesota? Because Ilhan Omar, who is a alumni of Vote Run Lead, someone who I have met personally. I met her when I was pregnant with my second, and I know that Donald Trump went into Minnesota because she stood up against him, and he decided, I'm gonna go after the Somalis. This is a witch hunt on the most racist. He's going after American citizens. If he can go after American citizens and make lies about them, and then you're gonna believe those lies, and then not try to fight back, and you think that that will work for you, any nation that allows a dictator to drain the resources of all the good people ends up with a nation that ends up being destitute and broke. Look at North Korea. Vietnam was a country that allowed a lot of corruption to the point that it became broke. Now, Vietnam has taken on a hybrid path of capitalism and communism, just in the way that they know how to run corruption a little bit differently. So that's why they're working with the Trump administration. I will tell you that the Vietnamese government understands the Trump government very well. Okay. But if you look at the nation itself, it doesn't live in poverty. Vietnam is one of the fastest growing nations economically in Southeast Asia. So Vietnam has figured out the hybrid way of doing it's like partial communism, partial capitalism, right? We cannot have an authoritarian state because we will go through communism, pure communism first, or pure oligarch. It's like communism for the poor and then like oligarchism for the rich, which is where in communism, all the poor people, all the masses gave up their money and then had to distribute equally, but the money still went somewhere. There was still money there. So like the money disappears or the gold or all this stuff. So who ends up taking charge of it? All the communist leaders. And then they realize, oh wait, now we're controlling all the wealth. They don't go communist. They go corrupt. So every country that's gone communist has failed. We are failing because we've gone complete capitalism unchecked. So the answer is to find a hybrid model. I think that we're going to see a lot of changes in the electorate coming up. I think all of the stuff that's happening right now with the government is making people aware. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest, we do not have a weapon in this house, even though we're military. But I am thinking about it. My husband does not want to get one, but I'm like, I mean, I don't want to be unarmed if things are like escalating to that point. I don't want to be completely unprepared. I want to take advantage of all of my rights, and that's one of them. So that's something to consider. I don't know. You guys tell me, what are you thinking? Will you ever use your Second Amendment rights if you see that your First Amendment rights are being impeded on through sort of like, I have almost like a boundary. I'm like looking at it about it. As it moves closer to me, I'm going to start getting more concerned and wanting to access all my rights. So where are you guys at with that? Are we the only ones that are starting to consider accessing our Second Amendment rights because we're worried about our First Amendment rights? Are we just remaining, not changing? Are we going to make adjustments? Tell me what you think. Until next time.